Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 81. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, Don. How are you?
I am awesome. Today we're going to be talking about some Watchmen. The first episode premiered. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about some news about Disney and Fox and what they're doing with their movies. But first, let's just and of course like Star Wars. But yeah, first I'd just like to say please like, share, and subscribe our content in our marketing movies channel. It really helps us out and makes us grow. If you really like our content, helps us out a lot. And yeah, let's just jump straight into it. So a little Batman movie has become the highest rated R-rated film, and it doesn't have Batman in it. Like, that's crazy.
It kind of is, isn't it? Like, yeah. Well, obviously, the film that we're talking is the new Joker movie. It recently became the biggest R-rated movie of all time, surpassing the first Deadpool movie. Um, I think it made as of recording, um, it's earned 788 million worldwide. So, and this is compared to Deadpool, which made 782 million in 2016. Um, and Deadpool 2, which made 785 million.
That's pretty
So,
nuts. Like, I thought like Deadpool was a pretty big appeal, but then again, like I forgot that like Joker is like, you know, the Joker, and then like
but that's the thing. Like, well, yeah, I guess to kind of compare it, I guess Deadpool was like a relative unknown, except to your comic fan who knows about like, oh, Deadpool is kind of like a parody, whatever. Joker kind of has a bigger name, but I think at the same time, like this movie, and much like the original Deadpool movie, was made on like a very low budget, so they got a lot in return. I'm pretty sure like the initial the funding of the Joker movie was 50 to 70 million. So it's reportedly it's gonna like kind of top up at about 800 million. I'm hoping that it does reach that 1 billion. Like that would kind of be insane if that is the case. But
that would be
yeah,
huge. Like
it'd be
to
huge.
for you know, like a thing that I would assume like not even like people would have wanted. Like I originally didn't think I wanted this film. Um, and then yeah, it blew me away, and I'm glad it exists, and to make that much money, and it kind of be a cultural icon because it hasn't just only made a lot of money. But you know, you actually see some photos, like photos of people visiting the Bronx and going to that the scene where the stairs are, and
Yeah,
everyone's
yeah, they're
taking
calling him the
photos.
Joker stairs now, which I kind of really like.
Yeah, and everyone's
Um,
going to those stairs, and it's like one of the it's going to be one of those iconic areas now. I feel like they've done
mhm,
like that's like it already has its legacy, you know.
mhm. Yeah, and I mean, like it's deservedly so. And yeah, I kind of hope that it does continue to do well, and maybe it'll set like a new bar for the next kind of big R-rated movie. And again, it's kind of showing that hey, like you can take a risk on R-rated films; they can make really good money.
Well,
So
yeah,
hopefully,
it that, and not only that, but I think it's like DC just shows that they're very much in a they're very much in like they're going really hard and they're doing really well so far. Like
well,
that because that's it. We got Wonder Woman 1984 coming out. Not quite sure about Birds of Prey still. That's still up in the air, but I feel like
yeah, that's gonna be
future's
trash.
bright in like for DC. I would say they're very polarized in comparison because one thing
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say with the Joker film, from my understanding, I think it was actually co-financed by like by a third party as well. So Warner Brothers didn't actually spend the full amount for this film. I think like maybe like they shared funding with a third party. So technically, like they actually didn't fully fund this movie, so they only get like obviously like a portion of that money back from this 700 or almost 800 million that it's made. But it just goes to show that hey, like when you have a good script, good cast, good director, what's going to come out of a film is going to be like good quality stuff.
Yeah,
Which is
because yeah, I'm shocked because it's made more than like Batman v Superman and Justice League. It just
yeah.
it really is just it just showed that like if it's a good film, people go out and they do see it. The strange thing about it is it's got good buzz on general people's sides, but like if you look at something like Rotten Tomatoes, it's pretty much hitting like a rotten rating. It's kind of crazy to see that, where you've seen this almost like polarization of like it's generally everyone seems to like it, but critics just seem to have a weird bone to pick with this film for some reason.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's currently sitting at a 69, so it is fresh, but yeah, it's not like it's not vibing with the general audience score. Again, like I kind of think like the media and like a lot of reviewers kind of have a bone to pick with this film initially, but hopefully like that's kind of turning around, and we are seeing a much greater and bigger a bigger reaction now that the film's kind of come out. And I hope it means that maybe it might be able to like get some kind of award, like an Oscar of some kind,
Yeah, absolutely. If not for the performance, and if not for the script, like, or at least the cinematography. It's like cinematography or acting has to be there. If not, then it's very much a snub, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, like, give it. Look, I know you do watch kind of much more prestigious films than myself, but
Yeah,
like,
I'm on the Scorsese and Coppola camp of Marvel films aren't cinema. So.
Right. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Well, I'm into more in this. You've seen a lot of the kind of films that have become like kind of Oscar nominated films or whatever, when the Oscar season runs around, and I look at these films and I'm just like, these look like either like okay to like trash. I mean, what was it? The Black KKK Klansman got like a nomination for best film. Like, come on, like, it's ridiculous.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Like there is some trash in the Academy, but there are always at least I always think that at least one year there's at least like every year there's at least one standout film where it's actually really good. Like, for example, I think this might have been 2012. It's like Blade Runner, or like Blade Runner 2016. Should have won, or like even I don't know if you've seen it. I think you were halfway through it or something. But Arrival, when that came out, I was just like, yeah, that should probably win, but it didn't win. So there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, there's at least, I think, a silver lining of like at least one really good solid film that comes out.
This is what I'm saying. It's kind of clear, like, the Oscar Academy or whatever they're called, like, they usually like get their rocks off every time something is like slightly musical based or something, like
or something very tragic. It has to be tragic.
I mean, is Maleficent a musical? Because I'd much like think that movie is going to have a higher chance of getting an Oscar than Joker, and that's purely because it like hits the right bars. If it's a musical and it's backed up by Disney. I mean, there's a lot of kind of what is it like? Marketing done by people for a movie. You have to pay money to be like kind of in the running to be nominated to win an Oscar. It's a big event. That you have to have some sort of billboard. Obviously, it has to release before the year's end. I think that's why like you see a lot of Oscar films, they get released around this time, like October, November, December. And then Australia for some reason gets them delayed until like January and February, because you see that delay because they need to hit the cutoff. It has to be released in that year, so that's why. Right.
Or like they have a stilted one where they just like limited release theaters, so they're releasing like 50 theaters across the US to be like, haha, that counts. Then we're in the Oscar running, and that's how they do it. But like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't watched the Oscars in a while. I just get the brief cliff notes of it now because it's just kind of like. Sometimes they don't get the good high quality films that they should get.
Exactly. But speaking of more kind of big news that has been coming out recently, we've been talking about how great this particular show is, like this entire like the entire time the show's kind of come out, but the Boys had nearly 8 million viewers over its 8-episode season. So for every episode, they had 8 million views. Like, that's crazy for like a online show, especially something that's off Netflix. this is like an Amazon Prime show.
Yeah,
Um,
it shows that Amazon is really bringing it. I feel like, and they're really getting there. I think people are more aware of Amazon and what they can deliver, because I think like obviously they've got so much of a budget in comparison to Netflix that they can actually advertise a lot of their stuff, like to literally like papers to like normal TV advertisements and things like that. That like they can really push it, and yeah, like The Boys is like, I think because I even read that The Boys had significantly had more viewers, and or like it made grossed out more money than the Umbrella Academy, which is probably a really fair comparison in compared to, because they're both comic book properties,
mhm.
and they're both like Netflix and Amazon, and like The Boys has made more of an impact. Like I like the Umbrella Academy, but like to be honest, like The Boys is still like it's like so far I think it might be my favorite TV show of this year, and when we get to that point at the end of this year, don't be
Yeah,
surprised if it's pretty much there. Like
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's already like I think already got number ones picked for movies and TV. So it's I don't, unless it's something that kind of really comes out of the woodwork that kind of like throws me off, like ooh, like Star Wars Episode 9 turns out to be really good. Like maybe Joker might be thrown off the top, but I highly doubt it. But speaking of Star Wars, the Rise of Skywalker final trailer got released.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think, to be honest, like, what did you before we kind of go and break the trailer down a little bit of about our opinions about certain stuff? What did you think about this trailer?
I feel like this is like, because compared to the last trailer, it very much used like nostalgia, being like, oh yeah, remember like the whole like journey of the saga, and I think they're really pushing hard again to be like, this is the end of everything.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know about this trailer. Like I don't really feel much for it. Like they do have the good Star Wars theme, so obviously that kind of always brings the emotion forward. But once you take away that, um, you don't really get much in comparison of what the plot is or what's going on. Um,
Hmm.
I think I've heard some criticisms as well, where it's like basically a lot of this trailer is people staring off into the distance looking at other stuff. Like you don't really hear any dialogue. You just hear some voiceovers about generic stuff like "May the Force be with you" and "The Force bring us together," like that type of generic stuff. But there's nothing about like what they're doing, where they're going, or yeah, I don't know. I'm very confused with this trailer, and I'm not that excited as I thought I would be, especially when you consider this is Star Wars and it's at the end. It could have been just because the Star Wars brand has been jaded, and so far we're not really happy with the new movies. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very confused with this one, to be honest with you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I think I think honestly for like a lot of people kind of going into the Star Wars movies, um, and especially the new trilogy, they're going to be a little bit kind of apprehensive regarding exactly, what this new movie is going to bring, especially after Episode 8, which kind of a lot of people thought was awful, and a lot of people want to be kind of like, oh, it's divisive. It's like, no, it's just a really bad film. Look, it is divisive in the sense that yes, people do have this either they like it or they hate it kind of thing. But I think it's just a poor. Like the more you think about Episode 8, the more awful it is. But I think at
Not only
least with
that, but the way it leaves a lot of the characters and the character development, it's very much lacking. Like that nothing kind of happens in a sense of like, there's nothing really happens with Rey and her character, or like Luke, for example, or Poe, or any of them. Like there's no real character development for any of them at all. So that's why I'm a little bit shocked, or kind of things like that, where there's just nothing there. You know.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, like when you like the sagas, like the original trilogy, it's kind of like the Empire and Luke be like helping to kind of get rid of Darth Vader and the Empire, bring balance to the Force. The prequel is kind of the rise of Darth Vader, whereas Episode 7 through 9 is, I don't know, like the Force needs Rey, and like the rebels are around still, and the Empire is kind of there, but it's just a different like
Yeah,
it's
because
kind
it's
of
like it's like what's the structure of the New Order? I don't know, or the Alliance. Like we don't know any of these little small details
well
that like
again I
you
think
would get from like I don't know the prequels or anything else where they would give you a lot more detail of the world and what's going on. In this world, I don't understand about like how far of a reach does the New Order have. They always say like in the Last Jedi, it's like, oh, we're down to our last fleet and like none of our allies are helping. But then in this trailer, it shows that there's a lot more allies that have backup. So I'm like, where is all this coming from? Like I feel like I'm missing like there was like a briefing or something where there's all these generals being like, yeah, we're gonna help you. Like I don't know what
no
the alliance or anything like that.
yeah, it is weird, especially given in the first movie they kind of start off the movie being like, oh hey, like there's like a new republic, and then they kind of kill everybody in the new republic like immediately, right?
Mm.
With the giant knockoff super powerful version of the Death Star or whatever, Death Planet, I forget what it's even called, something that's
Not the Death
forgettable.
Star, but the Death Star.
Something dumb and forgettable, right?
The Star Destroyer, I think that's what it was called. I don't know.
Yeah, is that what it's called? Star Destroyer or whatever.
It
Just
sounds very Star Warsy.
it does. It does. I don't know. Anyway, point being, at least I kind of felt that at least with this trailer has been the strongest thing that they've released regarding Episode 9, because I kind of felt like they've been a bit hush. I think maybe we even talked about it last episode. Like, hey, like why hasn't there been a Star Wars trailer yet? And then not long after they released this episode. So it's interesting to see what they have. And yeah, like you kind of see in the first kind of images, you see kind of Rey running in this jungle with her lightsaber out, and it kind of switches between like her jumping in the jungle to like jumping inside like a kind of a disheveled like rundown ship. And I think like it's supposed to be like this ship might be either like maybe an imperial ship, or it might be like because they've kind of hinted it at the other trailers of Darth Sidious, yeah, Sidious coming back, right?
The Emperor Sidious, yeah, same
Yeah, Emperor
character.
Sidious, yeah, the Emperor, right? Whatever. And so like maybe this might be her like kind of jumping around trying to get to him because he's like quote unquote dead, not dead, still alive. And I think it technically also harkens back to like her on Jakku, and how on Jakku, like she used to kind of rummage around.
There used to be like the thing where she could take care of herself almost, like she was a scrounger, like doing anything to kind of survive.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. It's like you like that's fair and everything, but I still feel like that still doesn't. I guess in comparison to like using your lightsaber or you like being inept with the Force almost.
Mhm.
So like I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of training or something like that of her doing something like that. Um,
Or
harkening
yeah,
back
like
to that.
maybe, yeah, maybe she'll be like trained by Leia or something like that. That's the one thing. Like there's been rumors about like how, oh well, Leia, obviously because Leia's still alive in this movie. She was initially trained by Luke to be a Jedi, but then she gave up on her training because she was going to give birth to Kylo. So or I think Jason Solo. I think that's his. Oh no, Ben Solo. Yeah,
It
Ben
was
Solo.
Ben. It was Ben.
Yeah, Ben Solo. So yeah, so like Ben Solo. So because she was going to give birth to him, she's like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this whole
This Force thing.
Jedi
What
thing. And yeah, and given that she is technically still alive, like maybe she's going to be um uh, giving Rey her training. I think the only problem is like again, she's not like a Jedi Master, so it's kind of weird that yeah, it's going to be one of those things where it's like, oh well, because Luke can't train her, and because Ryan Johnson kind of killed Episode 8, and
And
Luke
Luke with it.
altogether, and then also because unfortunately Carrie Fisher has passed away, they kind of have to like kind of scrape together what they can, with this particular movie the best that they can, so I don't necessarily blame JJ for kind of what he's been dealt regarding this movie. He does have to kind of, hobble together some kind of Frankenstein explanation to all the questions that not only he raised, but also stuff that Rian Johnson screwed up with episode 8. So, if he isn't able to kind of put everything together, I don't blame him.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like they can. However, it's just not going to be well justified / explained. Like, like obviously you can easily make a I forgot the exact term, but it's like you're kind of rewriting the script almost, and like JJ is pretty much really well with that. Same with like Lindelof and like their writing of just like justifying something that comes out later on. So it's like, oh, because of this and this, and it's just like
kind of retconning.
That's the word, like retconning things. So I feel like majority of the script and the whole thing of this is going to be retconning a lot of the stuff, because I guarantee you, like, the whole point of like JJ when he was at the first movie, he was going to be like, yeah, we're going to use Snoke as a thing. I guarantee you they weren't even trying to bring the Emperor back. But after Emperor 100%. Died, he's probably just like, crap, like, what do I do from here? You killed Luke as well. There's no training. There's all these like little small details where it's like it was set up really well. I'd say at least in The Force Awakens, to give it some, like, at least a structure. But now this is kind of like bringing it all back almost, because there's a lot of just kind of random stuff in this trailer as well. Like if we mentioned before, like we have C-3PO saying goodbye and his friends, and there is a rumor that his memory will be wiped.
Well, before we get to that, like, in regards to the trailer, like, we kind of continue the trailer, and we kind of see like, you have the return of Lando Calrissian, right? And he's kind of like talking to all the Resistance. By the way, I'm very confused about why they decided to change like Rebels to Resistance. I don't know if I've ever made that clear before on the podcast, but I've always found it very strange. Like, I don't know if it's due to, like, how a while ago, a couple of podcasts ago, I mentioned the whole theory about how if they use anything that was created by Lucas, like, Lucas gets like a bit of a cut from it. So maybe because the Star Wars Rebels, is a creation he made, he gets a cut from it. So maybe that's why they've changed it to Resistance. But it's just very strange, because they look like the Rebels in all but name. It's
like
really
it's the exact same thing, just that you just change the name because maybe Rebel stands to rebellious. I don't know.
But they even use it like in a comment, right? Like, I'm pretty sure, like
well, there was the animated show Star Wars Rebels.
No. But even in episode, I want to say episode 8, Finn like talks to Phasma, and he's like, yeah, like, oh, you goddamn rebel, and he's like, oh yeah, rebel scum, or something like that. Like, he even, like, they even play into it, So I'm kind of confused about that. Again, it's good to have, like, Lando back in it, but I feel like he's either gonna die, or they're gonna use him sparingly.
Or what's gonna happen is he's gonna finally get the the Millennium Falcon back. I feel like they'll just give it to him and go that way, or like and him and Chewie have adventures in the future or something
together.
Like that.
Maybe that could be true.
As a replacement to Han.
Continuing on, we see Rose Tico, who again nobody cares.
Yes, because she's definitely going to be at the base and not being out on the rest of the journey. That's for sure. She's going to be there on radio comms or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it kind of seems like they have to pay a bit of lip service to her, because she was in episode 8, but like realistically, like, she's not going to play like a big role, especially given like fan, like, kind of general dislike for a character.
Well, not only that, but in that scene as well, it's got the I forgot his name, but
guy from Lost, right?
Yeah, the guy from Lost / Lord of the Rings as well. So I'm like,
Dominic.
Dominic Cooper.
Monaghan.
Oh, Dominic Cooper. Dominic Monaghan. Yeah.
Yeah, Dominic Monaghan, and also I believe that's Carrie Fisher's daughter next to him as well.
So maybe he's like a pilot as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we currently don't know what his job is. but I guess we'll figure. Well, his role in the movie, but it kind of is like, hey, do you know JJ? Maybe you'll get a job like in his Star Wars movie. It kind of seems to be the case. But yeah, it's a good little like throwback. But again, like I'm not a big fan of Lost in general, so I don't really get too much from it. We see like a cool shot between like Chewie, Poe, and Finn. Like as you said, there's a lot of looking in these trailers. Like oh, what are they looking at? Oh, we get to see a lot more of this like cool little fight between Kylo and Rey on this, like, I guess it's like a water planet, a water world planet.
Who knows, man? There's a lot of random imagery in this thing, like the ice thing.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what the ice thing is?
Yeah, I mean, look, the giant iceberg, like, yeah, is that? Well, I mean, and we see a little bit more of that as well, like, with the ships kind of breaking out from underneath. We also see the Emperor's like throne as well in the same scene, like, it's like this cool spiky chair. We see the ships kind of breaking out of the surface of the ice. I'm not too sure what the purpose of that really is. Like, are these like his secret ships? That he hid somewhere.
Yeah, for all these years,
Well, the rumor is that these ships are going to have Death Star tech on them, which I kind of think is like, it's just like this escalation of like these the tech in Star Wars, but it's nothing new either. It's like, oh, well, what's worse than a Death Star? Oh, a Death Planet. Oh, what's worse than a Death Planet? Every single Star Destroyer having the ability to blow up a planet instantly, even though I kind of think that like most ships already had that kind of tech to begin with, like maybe not an entire planet, but like they could obviously bombard
do some severe damage.
a planet. Yeah, like through through other means, but it's just like, oh, we're just gonna have more big ships doing big damage, and it's like, again, it's this big thing. Like even George Lucas said that he kind of felt that Episode 7 didn't do anything new, which I completely agree with. And me and George Lucas probably don't agree on a lot of things. But Episode 7, I didn't find there was anything new, and it continues to kind of show that. Although there's a cool scene with, with the Millennium Falcon, and apparently on the right hand side is a ship from Star Wars Rebels. So the like the ship that the Jaden and all those people kind of fly around.
Extended
in, so...
canon,
mm-hmm.
it's a book report now. Like you gotta consume all the data to get all the well worth.
Well, yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit. Talk about Watchmen, but yeah, like look again, we kind of see a lot of cool shots, like Rey using like this kind of cool water skimmer. We see the scene that you're referring to, which is C-3PO like kind of being worked on, right? Like by like a little kind of, I don't know what to really call him, like this little creature who's like an engineer. Right?
Which, by the way, thank God there's not like new aliens. Like I think that's like the one thing like I've hated for all these new movies. There isn't really a new race of aliens, or like they're not in the forefront of, like, they're not in the main cast, like alien wise. Like like BB-8's a droid. I really wish there was like a, part of the main cast. There was an alien,
a new
aside
alien,
from like a Chewie or something like that. Like I wanted something cool like that, but we didn't get it, which I'm a bit sad for, because it's like it's still Star Wars and there's space stuff and there's aliens. There should be more interesting stuff out there. So it very much grounds it in such a way, because it's like a lot of it's just human characters, like, in a way, and it kind of
no, I definitely get you, especially given that, like, Star Wars does have a pretty like long list of like alien characters that are already like kind of exist. Like it would be cool if like one of the main characters, or at least one of the kind of side characters, is like a Twi'lek or something. Obviously, that's gonna cost money to have all the CG and stuff. Having a human character wear a mask is far more cheaper. You know what I mean? And speaking of characters with masks, we actually see one of the characters. I forget her name, but she's essentially like what kind of seems like a bounty hunter or something like that. She's kind of like the new mystery character. She's got this like cool kind of like golden mask, with like a black visor and a purple suit. I forget her name though. But yeah, like she's in this scene. with our like kind of main cast. So initially people were kind of questioning whether or not like, oh, is she good? Is she bad? I think it's
Maybe
kind
she's gonna be like the new kind of Han Solo almost, where it's just kind of like a semi bounty hunter, but kind of like, hey, but this is like, if I do this, it's in it for me almost. But then again, they kind of did the exact same trick on the Last Jedi, and then it was with Benicio del Toro, and it's kind of like, yeah, whatever, that wasn't that
well,
interesting.
yeah.
Like,
Well, sorry,
getting another betrayal, or like, at least they could do something like more in the sense of a Han Solo type, where it's like, hesitant to do for the greater good, but is there to do good stuff. Because I don't know, when you think of
well, yeah, we
Mask, you
have.
think of like a bounty hunter, pretty much.
Well, yeah, and I think she is like, oh, because all we know is like her name's Zori Bliss. I just looked this up, and the only thing that we kind of know is that she's an old acquaintance of Poe Dameron. So, yeah, that kind of already proves that maybe she isn't a bad guy. So there you go. But yeah, like we also kind of hear a little bit, what is it? C3PO kind of talking about how, oh, I'm gonna like have one last look at my friends, and I'm like, does he even know any of these people? All the people C3PO knows is like dead.
Yeah,
You know,
the real thing is there's no
quite literally.
R2D2 as well. Like, I feel like that's his biggest companion slash closest thing, like friend of all time. He's been in all the
Well, I don't
movies.
know. She could be. He could be there in one of the other shots. You never know.
I feel like R2D2 got the shaft in these recent films.
Well, yeah. Well, he's been replaced with BB-8.
Yeah, but like
And
R2D2 is mad though. It's like, and it is kind of sad to see like especially what they've done to the old legacy character, like especially like even just C3PO. Like, I remember the whole thing was like, yeah, what's the deal with his red eyes? But not only that, but his red hand, and now his red arm's gone as well. Like, there's just,
mhm.
I don't know, man.
Well,
Like,
I'm pretty sure there's some extended lore to explain why he has the red arm.
good old
But
book reports.
again, yeah, but again, who fucking cares? Like, if it's not in the movie, look, I'm just saying, like, if it's just a cool visual thing, like, that's all that matters. But if you want to know about C3PO's cool arm, go read this book. You know what? That's fine. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, and it's like not really important. It does make people think why it's there, but it's one of those details that doesn't really matter in the end, which also makes me question as why put it there in the first place. And I think you feel the same as well.
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of like cool shots of like they're like running down this hallway. I thought this scene looked really cool. It's like Poe, Chewie, and Finn. They're like going down a hallway, shooting stormtroopers, which I thought I kind of like, because I kind of feel the dramaticness of Star Wars has been missing. Like like them kind of running down hallways and shooting stormtroopers. Like
Yeah, it's
it always
very
kind
like
of feels.
episode 4.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like a lot of the times in Star Wars, it's usually like in the new trilogy. In the new trilogy, it seems to be very much like, oh, like the First Order is just gonna like run over people in what they're doing, and we don't really get to see a lot of the heroes kind of do stuff. With Episode 7, like we do have like a few battles between some of the characters and stormtroopers, but we don't really see too much of that. So it's good to kind of see a little bit more of it. In Episode 8, yeah, there are stormtroopers, but we don't really fight them, or we don't see the characters fight them that much. With the like more interaction with Ray and Carrie Fisher. Obviously, that's going to probably, hopefully, play a big role later down the line.
Well,
Like
that's
a
the thing.
lot of.
They're using like old footage because obviously Carrie Fisher died.
Mhm.
But that, yeah, like
Oh, the scene with horses, like these weird
Like,
you know.
you think episode 8 they'd steer away from the space horses, but they're back. Well, or like there's a new race of horses, but I'm like,
Oh yeah, and they're really weird. They have like they have like tusks, like like they kind of almost have like warthog face, right? Like pig warthog faces. Like if you, I didn't initially like look at it, like see this until I kind of slowed down, because this whole scene is like it's very small, right?
mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are these kind of these horses that are like on the ships, and the thing is, like, it looks like the ships are in the air. It doesn't look like they're on the ground
So it's
for the
like yeah, it's
scene.
kind of like almost in space or like somewhere atmospheric. So I'm like, I don't know how this works, but okay. Like,
Yeah, I'm kind of confused as well. And look, to be
doesn't the
honest,
ship have to just tilt one way and then they're all dead anyways? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, to be honest, Star Wars does have some really like kind of dumb things like that, which like even under George Lucas, like there's like those if you've ever watched the Clone Wars, there's like the like kind of these kind of space whales, right?
Mm.
And yeah, there are like these whales that are in space randomly, and it's just like, oh, that's so lame. But like, I get it. Like, it's kind of George Lucas's baby, but like, you want to kind of like either kind of shove that to the side, so they're almost like kind of a myth that people can kind of forget about. When you have things like, I don't know, horses on riding on ships, like it just kind of takes a little bit of the space fantasy away. Right? And you're right, especially given their last outing with horses in episode 8. You think they'd want to stick away from it. Now, the other thing is we see like presumably like another kind of fight sequence or like a discussion between like Rey and Kylo. I feel like there's going to be a lot of fighting between those two, like almost like
Yeah, there's
three
like
separate.
there's one in that water thing, uh, and I don't know. There seems to be other scenes as well,
There,
but like,
there's
but the real
there's
question is that like
mm,
Ray has beaten him twice, so like the conflict slash thing of like who's gonna win. I feel like it's nil and void almost at this point. Like they fought many times and they've both like Ray has won both, and I think that's where a lot of this stuff divides from a lot of the other stuff because like you know yeah, I think a lot of people do forget. It's like, oh yeah, like like we always say, Ray's a Mary Sue, which is true, and people are like, oh, that's not true. Luke is. I'm just like, yeah. Do you remember what happened at the end of Empire? He lost, and he got his arm cut off.
yeah.
Yeah, and he got bested. And he's not always the best, and he had to train for it. And I feel like Ray has always won, and she hasn't even lost anything, in a sense of like not only just a battle, but people. Like she's lost Han Solo, but who was Han Solo to her, and who was Luke to her, from someone who they've only just met like tangentially. And I feel like that's the problem that I guess Ray had because I felt like obviously if they had Episode 8 in particular way where she was more closer to Poe and more closer to Finn, and they had a complete adventure together in Episode 8. I feel like the attachment with a lot of these characters and the sacrifice they would have would be much more impactful.
Mhm.
But yeah, like going on a bit of a tangent, but essentially Ray almost hasn't really lost anything, whether it be
Mhm.
people or battle. She's just kind of been there, and I feel like that's one of the main problems as well, is that we do see, aside from her training and fighting, of course.
Yeah, like yeah, she hasn't really had the same kind of character arc, I guess. And again, like I don't actually blame Daisy Ridley. It's not her fault. It's really the writing and the directing that's kind of failed. Like it's never usually it's never usually the actor's fault that a scene isn't done in a way that's believable, right? Because you think that if something isn't good, it's the responsibility of either the director to tell the actor to kind of redo the scene, or or something like that, or it's the writer's job to kind of rewrite the scene and make it more approachable or easy to convey for the actor to give. So I don't blame Daisy Ridley for, unfortunately, her character Ray being a Mary Sue or acting really poorly. It's really kind of the direction the film has gone. Hopefully, JJ can kind of do something a little bit more interesting with her in this movie. But yeah, you're completely right. Like we're like there's also I think in the very first trailer there's a scene of Ray running up to a like kind of a TIE interceptor or a TIE fighter or something, and I think I'm pretty sure it's Kylo Ren in the ship. So there's obviously going to be a fight between them there as well. So there's like at least three fights between these guys, and then there's also other kind of rumors about like are they going to be fighting together and stuff like that. Like who knows? Like there's all this kind of rumors and leaks coming out. There's going to be a lot of interaction between them, but after the second fight, like isn't there just too many fights between these guys? Like why aren't we putting Rey up against someone else? It's too bad they couldn't do anything with Phasma, because you'd think like Phasma would be a pretty interesting character to have. Like Phas like having somebody who's like been trained by Kylo, maybe. Like, maybe not. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's going to be a scene with the Knights of Ren.
But
You know,
I
her
know.
fighting.
Apparently, I think I saw a thing. I didn't click the article, but it says that Luke and Kylo have fought the Knights of Ren before. But I'm like okay, like I don't know, extended canon stuff in the new Star Wars universe. I feel like a lot of that stuff will be shoved away almost, and put somewhere else. I feel like that's the sad point. But like, yeah, I never thought of Phasma, but it could be very. I wish, yeah, they used it because Phasma could have been like, yeah, I use like other gadgets and other ways to like, take people out, almost kind of like a bounty hunter, kind of like evening the playing field, from a
Yeah,
Jedi point of view.
I mean, look, like there is a tabletop version of Star Wars that was actually kind of created by people on Reddit called Star Wars 5th Edition. Obviously, a reference to Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition, and you know they have like stuff like race, like character races and character classes. You know, one of them is essentially like a soldier class that you can turn into a bounty hunter-esque class that relies on a lot of gadgets and stuff. So you know, it could be something that you can do like, oh, like what, you know, other than having like a typical because it's like the big problem, you know, and we've mentioned it before with a lot of superhero films where, you know, the big villain will be almost like the dark side version of the main character to kind of show like, oh, this is what you could be, you know, if you don't follow the path of righteousness. You know, the Flash fights the Reverse Flash. You know, Arrow fights Dark Arrow. I don't know, Supergirl fights Russian Supergirl. You know, like
He's just Russian.
You know, you know, and it's the same, you know, obviously it's the same thing happens in Star Wars, but they do mix it up here and there. Like, you know, for example, you had in the Clone Wars series, you had oh, and even in the original series, like you had Luke fight against Boba Fett, even though it was quite brief, but you know, you also have Mace Windu fight against you know, Jango Fett in I think Attack of the Clones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like, you know, all that kind of stuff, like it kind of gives the world like you know, it doesn't make like Jedis, like, you know, Jedis are supposed to be these kind of overpowered beings, but you know, how do you make a character seem cool? Like you make him fight toe to toe with the Jedi and almost like seem like they have equal footing, you know. But obviously, like, you know, we'll have to see whether they do that, because I'm trying to think, like, does Rey really fight anybody that isn't like kind of like a simpleton, like, you know, like a stormtrooper, other than
The throne room scene, and that's really been it. Like,
yeah, I guess the throne. You see, the problem is the throne room scene was initially cool, but then like if you ever rewatch that scene, it's really bad choreography.
it reminds me of like those old films, like, oh, it's a group thing. Let's all not attack at the exact same time.
Well, yeah, no, because in the scene, and I do recommend for anybody who hasn't seen this, if you watch the throne room scene, like, and you watch Rey, like one of the characters, like, clearly could have attacked Rey in one of the scenes, but kind of doesn't, because it's very clear that, oh, like maybe like there was like a mistake in the choreography, but obviously that was probably like the best take that they had, so they used it, you know.
This is why I like Jackie Chan films, because he's a perfectionist. He's like, nope, like we're even if it takes like 2 weeks to film one action scene, we're doing it right. I'm like, but that's the thing. It's like a lot of Hong Kong cinema does that, and like, yeah, Hollywood does not do that. That's why the fight scenes are different, and that's why like you see a standout when you see something like Daredevil, on TV with the choreography of the fight scenes in that stuff. It's because, yeah, they take the time and effort to do it, whilst like a lot of Hollywood stuff, they're just like, yeah, just who cares. And I feel like that's why my biggest gripe about like Western stuff generally is that. But yeah, like, and it also depends on the actor as well. You know, sometimes they have the capability to do it, like
yeah, like doing their own stunts.
Yeah,
and
for
stuff.
example, like John Wick, it's like you can see the difference between John Wick and like, I don't know, just a Fast and Furious action film, you know?
Yeah, especially given that, like, I think there's a really good video where they show, like, Keanu Reeves actually using, like, an assault rifle and doing, like, a course. And, like, he did this thing, like, under, like, I want to say, like, maybe 10 seconds or whatever. But, like, you can tell everybody else is really excited, and he's just like, ah, man, I could have done that better. Like, you know, that's the kind of guy. Yeah, like, he was just like, you know, I think he says, like, I missed a shot or something. Or, like he obviously got it, but he didn't get it on the first shot. but everybody else is really excited for him because he obviously like did it himself, and that's obviously reflected in the movies. Although I think, I think especially in John Wick 3, I think the scene where he's like escaping with with the dogs and kind of gets a little bit. But yeah, the choreography, the fight choreography in that movie is excellent. But speaking of choreography, we do see another scene where Kylo and Rey kind of like destroy like a statue or something. Not really too sure what that means.
The
like,
interesting part
like,
is if you see what Rey's holding is like a
the
knife
dagger
thing.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about leaks and rumors in a second, and it feels like it's kind of very much confirmed almost, unless someone's really really good at like making BS up.
Yeah, maybe. And yeah, so again, like we're seeing them like kind of fighting and working together. There's a lot of kind of it's kind of obvious that from the trailer what's going to happen, like it's going to be, oh, they're fighting initially and then they'll come together. We kind of see like a bit of like the cloak of Darth Sidious and his voice talking to Rey. So it's like, come on, like the whole basis of the film is pretty clear. They're going to go find Sidious, or some kind of MacGuffin of some kind. Kylo wants it too. They fight. And then one of them gets maybe the daggers, maybe that's.
Well, that's the thing. It's
yeah.
like I've seen some nitpicks on a lot of this type of stuff, and for example, the scene where you do see Rey and you do see the cloak of the Emperor. It's like in this like weird vision area, and I think people have like broken it down in such a way that in the other trailer before this, the one where you saw like Darth Rey, for example, it's in the same type of area as well. So it's almost like a different plane. So I've and it confirms with one of the rumors that the Darth Rey bit is just a vision, and it doesn't actually happen. It's just one of those like a very smart marketing person was just like, this is going to be the shot that blows up the internet, so let's just put it in there.
Yeah, look, anybody with 2 brain cells would know that that's not actually the direction that they're gonna, take Rey, and it was always going to be some kind of Force vision thing. I think they kind of the whole boat, about like trying to make Rey like a bad guy, kind of left after Episode 8. I kind of think. I think there was still because I've mentioned it several times on this podcast, but I'll mention it again. I kind of wish they did like a reversal of the characters. Like I wanted it so that Rey started off good, but then she becomes bad by Episode 9. Like she chooses to be part of the dark side, or you kind of find out that she was created by Darth Sidious, maybe, who knows. And that's why she turns to the dark side, and then you kind of see the opposite happen with Kylo. Like he's a part of the dark side, but then he becomes like a good guy by the end of the saga, I guess. But
the funny part of it is Kylo so far has had more character development, and I think probably
than Rey.
Rey has.
I agree. Yeah,
like
I agree.
He has actually a full character arc pretty much. It's pretty funny.
It is really funny. Just because like again, like, well, I mean, it's not. I guess good villains should have good kind of characterization. I think it's just unfortunate that like the villain has better characterization than the main character. I think that's the missed opportunity, so to speak. But yeah, there has been leaks regarding the plot of this film. Now, obviously, these are. I think this is getting into spoiler territory. We won't talk too much about them, but if you're interested in looking them up further, you can check it out on Reddit. Star Wars leaks. These are specifically by a user called Jedi Paxis, so JEDIPAXIS. So you can look it up for the full details. I don't want to really go into too much because the thing is, I'd like to know. Like I've already read like most of this just to kind of see like, okay, like what's the thing. The thing is, this particular set of leaks, we're really kind of going through like a little bit of what has come out, because this guy has his sources in Disney or through Star Wars,
like
or whatever.
Someone's getting fired.
Yeah, someone's getting, well, because the leaks are very accurate. And the thing is, like, it's kind of smart because, like, that Disney hasn't tried to like come in and like get rid of these, because obviously if you get rid of them, then that kind of confirms the validity of these rumors. There were leaks earlier about a leaked scene with Darth Sidious and Rey, and also Rey and Kylo. Again, you can look these up. Again, we don't really want to leak too much in regards to what's out there. I kind of want to discuss a little bit about things that are analogous to things that we've seen in the trailers.
Yeah, like at least something like semi-plot related almost as well.
Yeah, nothing that's going to be too much like, oh well, Pancake Parlay spoiled this particular scene. It's like, oh, we've seen this scene in the trailers. Like this should be, in line with what is happening. And one of them, and I think it was kind of confirmed so this particular set of leaks came out about a month ago.
Which is crazy because like, and it almost kind of has an accurate validity of it, just for the sole reason that this came out a month ago, and then when you see this trailer, a lot of the elements that has been on this post has come in the trailer, and as far as I remember, it wasn't in the previous trailer, so it's kind of like this person knew stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, it does go into mentioning a little bit about like how 3PO, as it says here, Rey uses newly gleaned information resulting from 3PO's modification and the translation of the dagger, right? So it mentions the dagger that you see in the trailer. It also mentions 3PO's modification. So again, like, it mentions that, there's some writing on the dagger that, they can't read. And so 3PO is using his memory. And we kind of see that scene where he's being modified by this little creature to maybe try and read the language that's on the particular dagger. Again, none of this is confirmed, and maybe this could have been changed, because there has been a lot of stuff about how they've been doing some last minute filming or reshoots for the film. So don't really want to say anything is definitely confirmed, but it's currently what we know so far. So I mean, I think these particular leaks have some validity to them. So at your own risk, regarding how much you want to be spoiled, I kind of wanted to see, because I don't have any faith in this film, unfortunately.
Well, as I mentioned, this is basically retcon the movie. This is like, how hard can you retcon? This is the exam here. Because yeah, there's a lot of random stuff. Because even like, for example, that dagger is like the MacGuffin of this thing, this thing pretty much, and it almost feels like from my Star Wars knowledge, you didn't like, this dagger is like non-existent or has never been talked about before. This is kind of created for the movie, just so then like they can go on an adventure. As far as I know.
Okay. So from
like, it's not established stuff, so it's just made for the movie that will make it into canon, I guess.
Yeah. Like, it hasn't been. Thing is, I think there was like something that I saw that basically showed the dagger, and whether or not it is the same one, I'm not gonna definitely say if that's the case, but it may have been in the Clone Saga series. So I'm, if it is the same one, because there is, I think it's called the Dagger of Mortis, and it shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of holding this particular dagger, but obviously it's not confirmed whether this is definitely the dagger that they're referring to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, like it again, it's one of those things where like, oh yeah, it's not in the main story; it's in like the Clone Wars story. So does it? I know I also don't like this either, where you kind of have to do like homework to figure out like what is going on with X or Y. But the particular kind of set of episodes that's it's based around is there's these kind of like these godlike figures who represent the dark side and the light side. There's like this like bold, evil looking dude. He represents the dark side, obviously. And there's this kind of really like angelic, glowing daughter who represents the light side. And then there's like the father of these. and there's also always like this talk about balance of the Force and stuff. And there's a couple of episodes centered around, Anakin, so he was supposed to be the chosen one to bring balance to the Force. And these episodes regarding it like talk about it. It's been a long time since I watched them.
Those are my favorite Clone Wars episodes. Actually, I felt like it was very interesting. It actually gave like some I guess background to the Force, even though people just we like to keep it mystical. I liked at least like this kind of like it's almost it is fantasy. Like it's like this is like Star Wars sci-fi fantasy. This is very much like a fantasy thing almost, and those two or three episodes were my favorite.
Well, in that particular episode, you do see Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, wield what I believe is this particular dagger, the dagger of Mortis. Or, whether or not it's the same one, I don't want to say. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But that's the only thing that I've seen people kind of discuss online about, oh, hey, this might be what she's holding. But we'll have to see further when the movie releases. So, again, if you guys want to kind of look up all these kind of rumored stuff, it is online. Again, Jedi Paxis on Reddit, Star Wars Leaks kind of talks about him, but yeah, I guess we'll end like any kind of spoilerist discussion going forward. But yeah, I mean, look, Star Wars Episode 9 is probably not going to be that great. I'm still probably not seeing this movie in the cinemas unless people say like, hey, it's actually not that. I need to hear from multiple sources that, hey, it's actually pretty good. You should go watch.
There has to be it has to be a good solid story first of all, and I feel like it needs to redeem some characters, and it needs to at least have like good scenes. Like it has to be, because apparently this is the longest Star Wars film. I think an hour, like 155 minutes.
Wow, that is actually really long.
So like, and obviously it's got to wrap up a lot of stuff. So it's like, and I don't know, that adventure part of it has to be good. Like there has to be like good, I don't know, stuff. Because like the one thing, like for example, we haven't even talked about is Poe and Finn. Like, what are they doing? As far as I know, like obviously they're gonna be there with C-3PO, but aside from that, they don't, like, as far as I can tell, even in the leaks, don't really say anything. But they don't really have a character arc or anything. They're not really. They're just there on the ride.
Maybe they're just gonna be bros and run around and, I don't know, find the MacGuffin with Rey. I'm assuming that's probably what their role is going to be.
So it's going to be, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. I know you hate the Harry Potter, but that's essentially.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the Deathly Hallows. But yeah.
Deathly Hallows Part 1 was all like, because the whole thing is like, oh, like Voldemort's only alive because these MacGuffins, he made 6 or 7 of them, they're Horcruxes, and they destroy it. And they go around, and then obviously there's tension in the group because like, these evil things make people act really evil. And then it's basically just in group fighting, being like, oh, you don't know how this feels to be, be the chosen one or whatever. So I feel like maybe they'll do something like that. But if that's the case, then they're basically just copying Harry Potter at that point, and which Star Wars should be the leader of things, not copying other things. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's gonna do anything like that. I think they're just gonna be the characters have been one-dimensional so far, so I can only expect that they're gonna keep following it. It's gonna.
I like how that was like a backhanded comment. It's like they're one-dimensional, so they're not even gonna try to bother to be complex like that.
Well, I mean, look, but that's not. But that's the thing. Like, when you do things for the sake of drama, it's not very interesting, right? In my opinion. If they're going to at least do things, they should be doing things that push the plot forward. And I think like they are kind of the supporting characters to Rey. So if they continue to be supporting characters, it seems to make sense. Like it's going to be, oh, Lando comes in, Lando inspires everyone, and Poe becomes the leader that he's supposed to be because Leia's dead. Like that's going to be probably his thing. Finn is just going to be, apparently there's another character who, the speculation is maybe it's like Finn's sister, because obviously they mention it in episode 7 that he was kidnapped as a child, so he hasn't met his family. So it is kind of like a big kind of spanner in his kind of storyline where, oh hey, he actually has family, but I guess he doesn't know how to react because he's never had or never was brought up with family. So that might be what they're doing with him and trying to see like, oh, like she's apparently she's like a resistance fighter. So like obviously it's like oh, I used to work for the I forget what the new bad guy's called again.
The First Order.
The First Order. Oh, I used to work for the First Order, but now I'm part of the Resistance. Like, it's going to be stuff like that. I'm assuming nothing too special, but they're just gonna at least give him something more to do. You see, what they need to do is like have that scene with Rose, and then have the invasion immediately happen, and then her character be like vaporized or something. Like, just
what happened to Rose's older sister?
Well, I think it's like in one of the James Bond movies where like at the beginning they like kill the
previous
bad guy from
Bond girl.
Yeah, from they because it's kind of like a big fu to the previous movie because of how like bad it was. It's like they kind of start the film off with James Bond like killing the character at the beginning of the movie and then continuing on from a new plot. So it's kind of like that. It's like, hey, look, we acknowledge how bad the first film is, so we're getting rid of everything that you hate from it, and continuing it fresh and in line with JJ's original vision of the movie. But again, I digress. Who knows if they'll actually do that?
Probably not.
Probably not. Let's face it. But yeah, I guess, is there any other kind of like final things from the trailers that you want to mention? I think I'm kind of done. Like this is probably going to hold off a lot of people till the movie comes out, which is, I'm actually not too sure. Is it in December or November?
It's in December.
December.
The funny part of it is, I think like Rise of Skywalker comes out, and I think 2 weeks later after that, because it's got like Christmas and then like whatever, Frozen 2 comes out, and I feel like, yeah, obviously both Disney things, and I feel like, yeah, it's pretty much set up Star Wars to almost fail, in a sense of being a family movie, because if people don't remember, Frozen was like the biggest thing in 2014. That Let It Go song was everywhere that you could for like one whole year. So like, guarantee you that like that's gonna make so much money with the kids, like so much money.
Yeah, Frozen. Yeah, it is kind of cannibalizing their own market, right? Like having like Star Wars and then Frozen 2, like next to it is kind of taking a lot of eyeballs off Star Wars and into Frozen. But I don't know, I think like they might use it as an excuse, like, oh, Star Wars didn't do well because we did this, but like the Mouse House knows what it's doing, so obviously like this was put into works and maybe it was done on purpose. I don't know.
Don't worry, the Disney people, they know what they're doing. And just a brief mention of a little bit of news that broke is that what Disney's doing is they're starting to put Fox movies in the the vault. And for people who aren't really versed in, I guess, the Disney type culture, so what they used to do for a lot of the animated features like The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast and things like that, they'd have these special like releases, like the Diamond release, or the special edition like premium release, or whatever, crystal release. So they would like update the visuals and the the audio quality and re-release the product, but it would be like, hey, for a limited time only, so it'd be only out for maybe about a year, and then they'd take away any units that didn't sell off the shelves, and that would be it. Very interesting concept. And apparently they started doing that now for Fox films. So then it might be harder to find films that been made into like Fox classic films, like something like Die Hard, or even like the first Alien, for example, or like Fight Club. Those types of films would be harder to find, or very hard to find, or like non-existent in stores to buy it, and the only way to watch them would be when they re-release it with their whatever cut they want to release, which is very dangerous. Or with some of the Disney stuff, if they do extend Disney Plus to also have Fox films, they can be like, you can only watch these certain Fox films on the streaming service. And I feel like that this could very much happen with the all new digital future of things, and if they take away certain things. So I feel like this is a very interesting play, and it really doesn't put it on the consumer side of things. So that's just one little thing I touch on because it's very interesting and how like things can very much play out in this. You know, we talk about a games for so long with like Steam. You don't actually own a lot of these games. Well, you don't really. So at any point they can take it away from you, and that's kind of it. And then you're basically fed whichever new version they want to kind of give you. So
Well, yeah. Well, I was just gonna say with the whole Disney Vault concept, like the thing I see about it is like I can kind of see like it kind of results in like this, I guess an artificial kind of shortage that they make,
like
and
this
they kind
scarcity.
of have
Yeah.
the scarcity, an artificial scarcity, that make people, oh, I want to get this kind of, I don't know, golden edition of Little Mermaid or something, the original, I don't know, voice acting, or I don't know, well, whatever kind of gimmick that they decide to put with it. I don't know if that's going to really fly in like the world that we live in today, kind of doing that. Just mainly because like, yeah, like why would people, people are kind of moving away towards digital sales. Why would they not just buy things digitally instead? And then on top of that, I think that's going to lead to more piracy, rather than people actually, buying these things, because they're going to just think, oh, well, if I'm not able to get this version of Little Mermaid with the new crystal graphics or whatever, I don't know, whatever, as you said, like things that they're trying to, edit or emulate, like they're just going to get it from a different source. And, you can't take these, the piracy is still pretty rampant these days, and you're never going to be able to take that stuff away from, the internet. So I think it kind of just drives people towards getting it from an alternate source instead. I don't know if it's necessarily a good idea. I think having like um, uh, a rotating like kind of catalog of different movies is kind of at least a little bit better. Like in a sense that I don't technically like it. Like if you want to watch, the Disney, Aladdin TV show, that they had in the 2000s or early 90s or something, like, if you have that in the Disney kind of catalog that you can watch on the new Disney service, and then like, oh, after a year it's gone, and then the following year it comes back, like at least that's like okay, because at least it gives people some kind of, you know it gives like this temp value, but then it eventually it'll come back and you can watch it. But at the same time, I still don't like it when they do that, because again, people want access to whatever. But it's their service; they can do it however they want. I just don't necessarily think it's a good idea. But that's just me personally.
No. You're rightfully so. But yeah, essentially, very interesting, and there might be news to come in the future where it's really official, and what they actually do with these films that are, you'd say, classic, I guess, Fox films, and what they do with them. Because it could be at a point where they're just like, yep, let's forget about it. Or, my whole thing is, there's still certain Fox films that, future-wise, moving forward, I wonder what they do with these franchises or things like that. Like, I always keep on talking about it, but the New Mutants horror movie, the X-Men horror movie, I'm pretty sure that's probably never going to see the light of day now, and they're just going to get rid of it completely and never see the light of day. Or, one of my favorite recent franchises of all time, and I think like this is my favorite most recent one, is the Kingsman series has been made via Fox. And The King's Man is coming out in February, but after that, and there's going to be like a Kingsman 3, but after that, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with the series or what they do with Fox stuff. I feel like this is kind of the problem that they, people had when they were buying Fox, and I'm very curious of, I guess, what they do with these properties and what they, if they're just going to be leaving them alone or trying to reboot them almost. So like my whole worry is kind of on that thing.
Yeah, whether they're able to kind of show these things that they had in development, or whether it's just going to be in development hell, and thrown away with the lock thrown away. Yeah, I can definitely see that being the case. Hopefully, it does come out. I think it's a bit of a waste. Like maybe even if they do, like, I don't know, like what does it hurt, like having it just released as like a Disney Plus bonus film that comes out? Why not just do that instead?
Yeah, might as well, instead of just putting a theatrical release and spending money putting it that way.
I think that's probably what I think would probably be the best way to do it. If they're not going to do if a theatrical release is going to be too much, that's probably the best way they're going to do it. But we'll have to see whether or not they actually do it.
Absolutely. But yeah, moving on to our final thing that we're going to be talking about today is the, I guess, 2019 Damon Lindelof version of Watchmen off HBO. So this is kind of set. I think it's called a retooling / reimagining of Watchmen, but it's a sequel at the same time of the original graphic novel by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons.
Is it a retooling? Isn't it supposed to be a direct sequel?
I think it's supposed to be a sequel, but like not really, because like because like we both read the comics of like Doomsday Clock. And I feel like that's pretty much almost like that is the real sequel, and I feel like this is almost like this is the sequel, but like done in a certain way or something. Like I don't know the official version of it.
You see, the thing is, I think Watchmen is kind of a bit of like is kind of like sacred text, right? And in a sense, like even Doomsday Clock, even though I really enjoy the book, especially issue 11 that came out. Wow. But anyways, the point is with Doomsday Clock, I think it's kind of supposed to be like a bit of like a soft sequel. Like it's not really a sequel. It's just like trying to combine the DC universe into a more comprehensive and new direction, especially given that I don't know if you've heard there's going to be another kind of crisis reboot event, which really makes me personally upset because I'm really liking the direction that DC is going with the Rebirth comics and where they kind of have everybody at this stage, like certain characters, because what is it, the New 52 kind of really divided a lot of the fan base, even though but the whole goal of it was to try and get new readers to come and read a book, read the books without feeling super alienated. And they're going to be introducing, I think the rumor is it's called 5G, which I think is kind of a really weird name to give it, given that like you have like 5G networks for phones and stuff, but 5G is supposed to stand for fifth generation, and it's supposed to mark the beginning of like the fifth generation of like DC comics. And in the background there was like leaks, I think maybe they did it through like comic book like CBR. They released like a timeline that DC had of the like kind of 4 major phases, and like the first phase was like the golden age, silver age, and then I think post-crisis is the third age, and then the fourth age is like New 52, rebirth and all that. So all the stories kind of like, so they're kind of making like a little bit of a timeline how X and Y gets to where they are, and then they're introducing the fifth age. And I think like alongside like with Doomsday Clock, all the events that are happening in the Justice League comic, which is by the way really great. People should read it. Beautiful art, excellent storytelling by Scott Snyder. But yeah, like all of it, kind of seems like it's going into a particular direction, and I think Doomsday Clock is a part of that too. Like it's kind of being used as Watchmen being a DC property is being used to kind of explain and kind of retcon a lot of the events that happen in New 52. Because if you read the thing is, it's kind of been hinted at that Dr. Manhattan, the guy from the blue guy from
the
Watchmen,
Blue Man. The actual one with actual powers.
With actual powers, yes. He's kind of been manipulating everything from New 52. That's the explanation, and Doomsday Clock is kind of showing a little bit about like the motivations and how things got to where they are. But it's done in a Watchmen style format. That's which I kind of really like. And I think the thing with the show, I think it's technically a direct sequel from the comic book as well. The graphic novel as well. But obviously, they're kind of hinting at like the event, because I think, for example, like the main character, she has like a lock that she unlocks, and I think the code that she uses is like 1985, which is where the events of Watchmen takes place, the year that the original event takes place. So it's very clear that they are trying to do a lot of references to the original Watchmen.
But do you feel like, because the way I look at it is,
Mm.
this show has, aside from like characters and few moments, I feel like almost the base plot line or theming of this show is not Watchmen, and I feel like they just added Watchmen characters in there or like references in there to make it as a Watchmen thing. Because like the whole point of Watchmen is it's pretty much a deconstruction of the superhero genre, where superheroes are, or like these I forgot the name of them, but essentially, the team is essentially an antagonist and as a protagonist as well. They have that morally gray, where they're good at
Mm-hmm.
parts and good and bad in some in parts of their personality and who they actually
Mm-hmm.
are. They're all flawed as human, and I feel like so far from this one episode, we don't really see the theming of what Watchmen is or what it's really about. I feel like this is it's shining a light on certain different topics that I guess the graphic novel really didn't touch upon. I feel like that's my general main criticism of this show, that
Mm-hmm.
it just uses Watchmen as a name value. That's my kind of how I
Sure.
feel about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I can kind of get where you're going from, coming from, because I kind of agree as well, and I think maybe a lot of people, um, kind of agree also, because I think like at the moment, we kind of mentioned it before, um, with when we were doing the review of Batwoman. But there is currently what people, at least news sites are claiming, that there are review bombing of the Watchmen TV show. Now, again, I've mentioned it before that like, we don't actually know where there's it's like an organic dislike of the show, because I think here's the thing, and I don't know if I mentioned it with the Batwoman thing as well. People are more likely to show like a dislike for something more than a like for something, and it's going to be more prominent. In the sense that, like, if people really dislike a movie, you're gonna hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we live in this, I guess, technology age. Like even like people like us, if we like really blew up and we had like hundreds of thousands of people listening to us, like
Mhm.
people would listen to our what we say and what we do, and kind of they would form their opinions also based on what we say as well.
Yeah, what we say and
and
stuff like
and
that.
and that's the
Yeah,
thing. I feel like it's more of a widespread opportunity. So when you do hear these people online and they talk about it, it's not necessarily bashing the thing. Almost, it's just like they don't like it, and but they found their audience. I guess of
Mhm.
people not liking it, because I even remember before.
Sure.
I guess this internet culture of like podcasting or movie reviews. Pretty much everyone on the online community hated, for example, something like Twilight. Everyone hated Twilight, aside from like the normies, I guess. And it's kind of like
Mhm.
maybe it like, and since this is kind of grown almost, where a lot more people are using the internet in such a way to have a voice and things like that. I feel like it's done it in the exact same type of way, because as we are mentioning
Mhm.
before, this is kind of the exact same polarization of something like the Joker, but where critics like some things and audience likes it, and like this has kind of been the heated thing for like the past 2 to 3 years, and I feel like it's so weird that there's such a divide, that we're seeing the exact same property
Well,
but it's different.
here's the thing. I think the weird thing about this HBO series is that it is one of those things that I don't think anybody really asked for, and it's about something that's pretty sacred to people. Like the Watchmen graphic novel, in and of itself, is perfect. It's one of the best things out there. I highly recommend it. Recommend reading it. Like I've read it like a couple of times, and each time, if you kind of read it when you're in a different stage in your life, you kind of get different things from it. Um, and yeah, like sometimes, like when I was younger and I pick a, get a lot of like the quote unquote political things that they talk about, but it's much more prominent when you read it like as an adult, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get where they're coming from, with X or Y. With this, it's I originally thought, like, maybe is this going to be like a prequel? Is it going to be is it going to have some of the characters that we like? We don't know. And I think at this stage, like, given that it's made by Damon Lindelof, who's a very, I'll be very nice, a very contentious figure, in terms of whether people like his stuff or not. I generally do not. I think he is a very bad writer. But again, there's a reason why he's in the business and I'm not, right? Like he's at least he's done some good things. I think you're the one who really likes his it's like I forget what it's called. It's like Leftovers
Yeah,
or
the
something.
leftovers. Yeah, I think I like that show because it had a very unique and interesting tone. It was very dark and depressing, and it was basically just like the whole premise of that show is, what if like half the human population on Earth just randomly disappeared, and it's just people kind of dealing with it. And I feel like that one had a lot of, I guess, character development and the kind of character moments, and I feel like that's why I liked it. Whilst Lindelof's other work, for example, like Lost with JJ, is like it does have character moments, but it isn't done in a well point. As well as his movie, where obviously we've talked about Prometheus many times, just in the cuff, and it's very much just like they made stupid decisions because they needed to make the plot go forward. And I feel like Lindelof is and I feel like what this Watchmen show is kind of doing the same stuff where, I'm kind of almost sick of the mystery box style of writing, which is basically like, we're going to have a MacGuffin or a mystery, but we're not going to reveal it, or certain things are going to be doing something else. Like, because I think everyone forgets that, for example, Westworld is produced by J.J. Abrams as well, and it has the same kind of mystery stuff about it now. And I'm kind of almost at that point where I'm just sick of like the mystery of like, what's going on? Who are these things? I don't know. What's the symbolism of it? And I feel like I'm almost at that point now where I'm just kind of sick of that now. And could you just tell me a straightforward, good story?
Well, no. You see, I think the problem is, with these people, or at least the kind of writing that's shown in these kind of films, is that it's less about there being a mystery, but the chances are they'll just put some weird shit in an episode, and they won't really address it in the future, or it's just there to be weird. And isn't that interesting plot wise? But then it doesn't actually have anything to do with the plot or pushing like a narrative or a character development piece or something like that. I think ultimately, like a lot of the times, especially with Lost, like I don't know when I think I gave up on Lost. I should have gave up on Lost after they fucking found the vault. I think that was like my particular...
The underground cellar, and then there's the timer.
Yeah. Like I thought that was gonna be the... I think that was like at the end of season 2 when they reveal the vault, and it's like, oh, the vault has food, and I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna go on forever. Because the big thing about Lost initially was, oh, okay, cool, like they're kind of running out of time, so they have to figure out what all the the mystery is, and it's like it's got a clock, right? It's got like an expiration date, but then the vault kind of gave it, oh hey, here's all this food, and oh, the food is not going to perish anytime soon, and Haley's still fat. Like how does any of that make sense? I guess that's the mystery of Lost. And then I think I gave up, like either it was during the season where like they were having like flash forwards, like they were in the future and they had to return back to the island.
Yeah.
I think that's the season where I gave up. I'm just like, this is dumb. Like, it's like, I get it. It's an interesting plot point because again, it kind of did like a little bit of like what Arrow did, right? In a sense that like it has the flashbacks to the people's lives and how it relates to what's happening to them on the island or whatever. It's a thing. But anyways, point is, Lost. It's awful. And after somebody explained to me what the ending is about, I thought it was even more awful. It's one of those things where people predicted it from the beginning, but then it was just 10 seasons of crap or whatever. How many episodes? Is it 10 seasons? 6
It's
seasons?
around there.
Whatever.
It's like 8 or something like that.
Yeah, it's like eight seasons of crap. And oh, also, by the way, Lindelof also did the writing for Cowboys and Aliens, which also did really bad. He also did Star Trek. He did he was a producer for the first Star Trek, but he did the writing for Star Trek Into Darkness, which was also a really bad film. World War Z, I've heard mixed things about, so I don't want to say whether that's like...
I like it, but obviously there was a lot of problems with that one. That like the last quarter to a third of that movie was reshot, and it's actually better the last quarter. So who knows what part he wrote.
And then Tomorrowland, which also did really bad. Although, again, I haven't seen it. I've only heard like it was like, oh, it's going to be really good and
It's
has George
yeah,
Clooney
it's
in
got
it.
cool concepts, but doesn't deliver on much of what it's trying to say. And I feel like that's kind of Lindelof in a nutshell, where it's like cool concept or cool interesting premise, and then doesn't deliver on what it can be or the full potential of it. I feel like so far there's only been one episode that's been released, and I'm not quite sure. Like there has to be more world building, because I'm not gonna let things go in this thing just for the sake of letting it go. For example, it's pretty much out there that the Rorschach, I guess, name and the mask are kind of being used as white supremacy in this show, which is, by the way, just ruining a really great character and their icon, and the kind of things we're left off. My whole point is, are they going to explain why, or what was the reason behind this sudden change? Did people just co-opt the symbol and just start using it? There's even small things where like there is a scene in this show where they're at the police station, and all the police have kind of like their own superhero identity masks, and I'm just wondering, okay, what started this? Like, is there some sort of like superhero police code? I don't know. Can you explain this to me?
Okay, okay. So the first thing, I'll address that first one first, because apparently there's a website called PDpedia, and that kind of bridges the gap. Is like officially from the people who made the Watchmen TV series. That's supposed to bridge the gap between explaining some things that's happened between the Watchmen movie and now, because it's kind of skipped from the 80s till to 2019, like current year. So there's like, ooh, like what's happening at the moment. So there is some explanation, but again, I think to harken back on what we said earlier, it's like all this extra reading homework that people need to do to quote unquote understand what's going on. And I think it's very lazy to be like, oh hey, but you have to read the seventh book or the seventh paragraph to understand what's going on in this particular scene. And it is kind of interesting, because like after doing I have done some of the reading, so I mean I'll try and explain at least some of it, but I think it's a bad way to go about it, because I think it leads to these kind of misunderstandings and these kind of like jump the gun reactionary responses to certain things in the show.
Yeah, as I was mentioning before, like with Star Wars, like what happened to C-3PO's like with the red hand thing, or even like everyone was saying like, oh yeah, who's Snoke? What's his background? They're just like, oh well, in this book it explains it. But I'm like, my whole thing is like, it shouldn't be like that. Almost, it should really be kind of a complete story, and should stand on a kind of on its own. Or even like if you just needed to have some sort of flashback or certain way, a more natural way of explaining things, I think that's the best way to go, rather than just being like, we have to make a supplementary material for you to understand what's going on in this product and other pieces of media.
I mean, look, the thing is like to kind of go from like the very beginning of the show, we kind of see like a little boy. He's watching like this kind of old-fashioned kind of movie with like this I guess this kind I think it's supposed to be like not a superhero, it's kind of like a Lone Ranger kind of like movie where there's like a black sheriff who like takes out this like corrupt man. The whole thing I kind of find in this show, and it's very related to the symbolism that you see in Watchmen in general, is like this concept of like good and bad, and whether things are black and white, and that also relates to some of the characters being black and white, like in terms of their skin color as well, but it's also related to how they are morally, right? Like, because you kind of see it in somebody like Rorschach, who is the epitome of somebody who only really sees the world in black and white. Like, they're either good or they're bad. Even if the reasons for something is good, if you're doing them through bad means, ultimately they're bad. At least this is the kind of themes that we see in Watchmen, and it's kind of contrasts with somebody like Adrian Veidt, who, spoilers for the Watchmen movie or the Watchmen novelization, Agent V, not a good guy, and he kind of sacrifices like the lives of millions of people for world peace, right? But he kind of sees as what he is doing ultimately better for the world than having them go on about themselves and causing what would potentially be like nuclear disaster, which would be quote unquote far worse. But you do it
which
through...
which like the most like recent example would be something like Thanos, just kind of like,
Right.
killing half the population so the rest of the population can strive, type of thing. Like it's
Yeah, and survive and be better.
yeah.
And you kind of see it like now. The first thing is like I watched this particular scene at the beginning. It's set in Tulsa, which is a place in America, and it essentially starts off with a bunch of this a predominantly African American town, kind of being ransacked, and a lot of people being like slaughtered and killed, and we kind of have these characters. The one thing I kind of found really confusing, like a soldier comes in, gives his gun to his wife, picks up his son, and then is running in front of all this like kind of death and carnage and shooting that's happening. It kind of seems like I was really confused because you'd think like, oh, the wife should be the one going up first because she's the one with the gun, right? Like she should be the one protecting them from harm's way, because you wouldn't, because if his child is who he's trying to protect, then he should be at the back, or he should be the one with the gun because he's the soldier, right? Like I don't know, I'm really confused about what this scene was supposed to kind of depict. It seemed like it had a lot of mixed messaging in what they were trying to provide. Is it supposed to be like these are they're both military trained, or only one is? But if they're both are, why isn't the wife or the mother up forward with the gun? It's really weird. This was the only kind of weird thing I found about this scene, but everything else was very interesting. It's a very visceral scene. You see like a lot of people getting like shot, or like being carried by nooses and stuff like that. And the big thing is, I thought this was just supposed to be like some kind of like a fictional event that occurred in Watchmen, because it's like this kind of like a hyper violent world. Like you can kind of describe it as like almost being like Tarantino's world, and how hyper violent version of like World War II, or modern day, or whatever. I looked into it, and these Tulsa riots, or the Tulsa massacre, or whatever you want to call it, it's a legitimate thing that happened in America. And Tulsa used to be known as it was nicknamed the Black Wall Street, because it was a predominantly black area. And yeah, this particular event did happen in America. So it's very interesting to see that it isn't something that's at least well known, I guess, outside of America. And even when I looked online, there were a lot of people from America who was like, oh, I didn't know like this happened. So I kind of like at least the educational aspect of this, because it does actually give me a little bit of insight. And as we find out, like the little boy ends up being a pretty important character in line with the plot. Like a couple of I get he'd be like 100 when he's introduced in the show, but 100 or so years later, like he's he comes from this particularly important event. So I kind of like that really big opening, because again, I just thought it was like this. It was just a scene that oh, okay, cool, like in this alternate reality world. But no, it's not alternate. It's real life. This actually did happen.
Because that's the thing. You would say it's alternate once, like I guess like the Minutemen, for example, existed, but it's up until like I think it's essentially once they got like Dr. Manhattan, because the whole point of the timeline is once they got Dr. Manhattan, basically the Americans won the Vietnam War. And then and then
That's
Nixon
correct.
got voted in, I think for another term.
For another term, that's correct.
So
and then,
that's kind of the change, I guess, of the timeline, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, we kind of I kind of see that they are kind of playing into this line of and you mentioned it before with like you have like a couple of characters who are essentially supposed to represent I guess like a new like kind of white supremacy, or kind of anti like I don't know, black organization.
But that's the thing. Is
Again,
it is it
I don't
100%
really want to.
confirmed? Because I keep on hearing it. I kind of use it, but it's like from what the first episode showed, it's not necessarily saying like I don't still know their whole like deal. As far as I
Well,
know.
here's the thing. I don't want to. Look. Here's the thing. It again. You have to remember the person who is making this TV show, and there is the potential that if this isn't just supposed to be some kind of, I'm kind of having a little bit more a wait and see approach in regards to whether this is all just like easy race baiting stuff, like, oh hey look, like, oh we have white supremacists, oh it's going to be this very paint by numbers, good guys versus typical bad guys. But the thing in Watchmen that we kind of see is that not everything is what it seems. So I think that there is probably some kind of bigger overall narrative that's being spun, and maybe the whole concept of like this white supremacist, I forget what they're called actually. They're called like the seventh something, seventh kings. I don't know what they're called, but like they're essentially supposed to be this organization, but maybe like that's supposed to be like a bit of a front, and maybe that you know, because there is later on in the episode there seems to be some contradiction which what we as the audience know. The first kind of incident we see that I think is kind of weird, this like trucker guy gets stopped by a cop, and the cop kind of sees that, you know, in his glove box like there seemed to be like a Rorschach mask, and it's really interesting because the cop needed to get permission to use his gun, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be like this concept of like high gun control in this kind of future that they live in, and he needed to ask for permission. And the person who was giving him permission was like this guy called Panda, who we later see is like this dude in like a giant panda mask. I think like maybe he's supposed to be like a government official, therefore like, you know, he's kind of against giving permission to use guns unless under like you know, severe use. And but ultimately like, you know, he because there was like, you know, a fatal shooting that happens, and it is revealed that this guy in the truck was actually a part of this you know, organization. But the thing that I was confused about, it's like he was asking like, oh what are you transporting? Oh I'm transporting lettuce. And then like he throws like a cabbage or like a lettuce head into the cop car. So it's like he was actually transporting lettuce, but then he also was a part of this organization. So like, I guess, and the thing is throughout the even when, because I think there's supposed to be like this contrast between you know, police and gun control, right? As well,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, again, these are all things that is speculation until maybe there's a little bit more, a lot more episode. But I think like, you know, it's supposed to show like, hey, like, you know, cops being happy or trigger happy. That's like a big thing in America, being stopped over and potentially
So
like
then
killed
once they
by a
have
cop.
like a very big, like they have to get control first to get a gun, it's kind of
Hmm.
almost showing in such a light
Well,
where it's like if they did, you know, it could cause actual deaths of cops as well. Um,
exactly.
so
And but as
that's
you
why
can,
it's very interesting in that point of view. But it's just like yeah, I guess it's building an interesting world, and I'm just very curious of, you know, I guess the roles of certain people and the, kind of the characters. Um,
mhm,
because I, you know, one thing I kind of want to touch on, you know, how we were talking about like before about, yeah, you know, maybe not everything is as it seems,
mhm,
especially with the group. You know, another factor that we'll probably be talking about in the future is kind of like you know, the last few scenes where I guess Osmandius kind of fits in everything.
right, yeah, hmm, yeah. And yeah, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The thing is, you know, we kind of see like, you know, later on it gets fast forwarded. We see that like, oh, like the police sheriff, he's being called to like see what happened to this cop. We see this like cool dude. Well, I don't know if he's a cool dude. I just like his mask. Like the mask is really cool. It's like this kind of reflective, like mirror face. I don't know what it's called, but like they refer to it as his face, very similar to how Rorschach refers to his.
It's basically
Um,
even like the actor without his mask on, he looks kind of like the guy who played
Kind of like Rorschach. Yeah,
Rorschach.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
like, okay, like you're kind of like the supplementary Rorschach.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. Like, obviously there's like hints at like, oh, these characters are here in some way. Like, yeah, he is kind of like has the cool mask, and he has like this like kind of, I guess like a country like accent. But like, yeah, like they refer to. But I think like in universe they refer to these masks or these kind of face coverings as their faces, right? In very much similar way to how Rorschach did. So clearly there is like the stuff analogous to that. We also see as the episode continues, like Doctor Manhattan is still on Mars, and there's a live feed of him. Um, and yeah, from what it looks like, there's like he makes like a castle, and it's like the same castle that we see Adrian Veidt in later in the episode. So ooh, like what's going on there? Um, I didn't
Mm.
know this, but you know how like later on in the classroom, um, we had our main character. She's like, talks about like how she was in Vietnam. If you look around the room, there's like, a new United States flag. There's a bunch of planets, but like Mars has water on it. You have like the squid rain, and there's all this kind of stuff that's like in the classroom that if you don't pay attention, which I didn't initially, but when I look back, I'm like, oh hey, like this room actually has like a lot of really cool set pieces that they're setting up.
Well, yeah, I feel like that's why I was kind of I put it in such a way where it's like the main story so far does not feel like Watchmen, but like they're adding all these like little small things like hey, like Squid Rain, and they showed that in the episode to be like
Mm.
this is linked in the same universe almost, or like it's like references, and I'm
Well,
not quite sure if
well,
it's like it's world building, but I would rather see it in a better way than just like kind of a reference.
but you
I'm
see, but I
more in
think
that type of thing, but yeah, as I
But I
mentioned,
think the
like it could
squid
be different.
rain. But here's my speculation about the squid rain. I think the squid rain is either like a continuation of Adrian Veidt's like plan, because everything he wanted either didn't happen. Because this is like we've been reading Doomsday Clock, right? And in Doomsday Clock, everybody finds out that the whole like event, the teleported squid and the psychic attack, all that was fictional and it was created, and everybody finds out and they want Adrian's head for it. They want to kill him. In this world, Adrian is quote unquote dead, and we kind of don't know what's happening in the rest of the world, and is the Squid Rain like a continuation of the stuff that he did, or is it like a way that the government is trying to control the population? Now, that's gonna be a point of contention in just
Well,
a
yeah,
moment because
well
we see a
that's
little
the thing.
bit.
It has to have some. It's because obviously the whole point is like the squid was like fake and set up, so it's like, and there
Mhm.
is no squid rain per se, so
Well,
someone's
it's
artificially doing it.
yeah, and maybe they're doing it because and this will be clear in the second, because we see our main character. She's like, I think she's known as like the nun or something, and she's just like this. She wears this like cool attire, and she kind of like busts in and like it takes this dude who who I think is obviously suspected of being like part of these like new Rorschach supremacist people, right? Now they take him to the cops, and the cops she comes to the cops, and the cops kind of view like these Rorschach followers. They're talking about how like, oh, like the end is coming, and they quote a quote from Rorschach's journal, but it's been edited to have like these kind of racist connotations in it. In the original Watchmen, Rorschach, I don't believe from memory, is a racist. I know he definitely is like a prude, and like he's definitely like sees like people as like like the average person as like degenerates. Like like if he sees like a woman dressed like scantily clad, he just thinks they're a whore and stuff like that. Like again, these are kind of the reason why like you're not necessarily supposed to consider Rorschach like a good person. Like it's very clear that he kind of has the mindset of somebody who almost like a child, in the sense that like he views the world in black and white and not in like in grays. And the thing is, like, you know, as you read the Watchmen comic, and I think this is the reason why people like Rorschach, you know, at least you know, as like a characterization, because as you kind of see him throughout the comic, you see like what made him become the person he is, and then like towards the end of the comic, like, you know, he kind of has a lot of redemption. He kind of starts thinking, oh, maybe like, you know, some of the stuff that I've been doing, you know, isn't good, or maybe it's not the best way to go about it, and he does redeem the things he does. It's kind of clear that, like, you know, he kind of gives his journal at the end of the original Watchmen movie to like a right-wing newspaper publication. And the thing is, it could very much be that like this, whoever got their hands on his journal could have like used the journal to try and obfuscate the original intention behind it, which was to reveal the plans and all the events that you know, Adrian Veidt was behind. Because, you know, later on in interrogation, you know, they ask the man who the nun brings in, do you believe that the squid, like, I think it's something along the lines of, do you believe that psychic attacks are committed by the government, right? And he says something along the lines of maybe no, or something like that. And the thing is, we know as the audience, if you've read Watchmen, that the psychic attacks were fictional, like they were created by Adrian Veidt. But it's clear that the orthodoxy, or the kind of the status quo in universe, doesn't know that this is the case. And so anybody who kind of questions the current narrative behind the events are considered, you know, maybe extremists, or, you know, in this case, white supremacists. Like in this case, I mean, they're white supremacists because they hate, like, you know, other races.
Because that's the thing.
But I mean,
because
I think,
yeah, as I mentioned before, because there's no necessarily 100% truth that says like Rorschach or like the journal said like they're white supremacist group per se. I feel like it's almost kind of like a thing of like suppression of media almost, and I feel like it's kind of the thing that it might be playing it smart, or it might be playing it really simple and dumb. But you know, I hope it does the high road, in the sense of kind of like and does the grayness of the Watchmen comic almost, where it's like the, you know, like the journal gets published, and the government's trying to cover up, being like, oh, whoever believes that is you know, fake, and you know, and I feel like that's where the split off is. So they believe the Rorschach character, and then they're kind of like almost like they're actually technically Rorschach is actually true, but however they're seen as people who believe in conspiracy theories, even though it's true.
Well, yeah, correct. And I think obviously because they're injecting their own kind of ideas alongside of Rorschach's ideas, it kind of muddies the water regarding all the stuff that he's saying. Like, I think the other thing is like and I didn't get this initially until I found out that in the extended lore kind of aspect of it, a question gets asked by the Mirror Mask guy, and he asks him, do you believe that all Americans should pay taxes, right? This is a question that he asked, and the guy responds, yes, right? Now, the thing is, Redfordations, which is something that was mentioned earlier to the nun when she's at the school teaching them how to make cakes or something. One of the kids asks, oh, were you able to open your bakery because of Redfordations? Now, Redfordation, I think Ronald Redford, or I don't know, he's some kind of actor. He becomes the president in America, and apparently Redfordations is essentially people, I think, African Americans who were, I guess, victims, or whose families were victims of slavery, basically were exempt from paying tax. So that's essentially what Redfordations is. So by him saying yes, all Americans should pay taxes, that's almost implying like, oh yeah, like these like black people who get like tax exemptions from the government, they should also pay taxes. And it's very interesting because I didn't understand after the interview, like the mirror guy was like, yeah, if you look at the guy's eyes, they were like, yeah, clearly he's a racist or something. And it's like, I didn't get that. Like, obviously, like, we know as the audience, yes, he's probably like part of the group or whatever, but it wasn't super clear. But there's all these kind of subtle things, which again, you have to read outside of the actual the show to find out that this is the case. But again, like, I think hopefully they're gonna explain, because again, there's 10 episodes, or is it 8
I think
episodes?
it's just 8. It's a very
8.
yeah.
Okay.
It has to
I,
explain
I'm
quite a
I'm
bit
I'm
around the
hoping
end.
I'm hoping that eventually that they will introduce the concept of red federations. They'll explain a little bit more about what that is in the show, and then it's going to make more sense. Like, oh, okay, like that's what red federations is. And then, like, if you go back and watch episode 1, like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense why the guys thought he was like a bad person or a racist or
But
whatever it
that's the
may
thing,
be.
as we were mentioning before,
Yeah.
that might not happen with Lindelof and the extended, like, you have to read this book report to understand the
Right,
TV
right.
show. That, and that's kind of my a problem as well, where it's just like,
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I think that's also the problem that's going to be in this. Like, this is just the first episode, so I'm giving it a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that hopefully that it may be able to get people in. And like, again, there is like I think a lot of people aren't very happy with the way that the initial episode is, because they're doing stuff like, oh, but all the people who follow or considered the uh, you know, uh, Rorschach's way of viewing things is obviously a racist. But like, it does kind of destroy the original character. But I'm hoping that like the reason why they're doing it is supposed to show that information can be manipulated um, by the powers that be, or whoever has control of the information.
mm,
So even though Rorschach isn't a racist or whatever, people can use his ideas and his knowledge to manipulate the masses into whatever form that they want him to be, whether it be white supremacists or what was it, Islamic extremists, like whoever, whatever
well,
kind
that's
of.
the thing. It could be also the same, and I kind of want to see it as well, and kind of like the police side of things,
and,
like,
and here's the thing,
because
I
that's the thing.
hope
You,
they
you
do
you
that.
might know, because like when they show that scene in the police station, it's very brief, but it almost looks like there might be like some sort of tension, or like there's something like, there's an inside group almost that might be controlling certain things. It's
Mhm.
like because at the end of the episode, like the sheriff's dead, and the
Well, before we get to that, there's one other thing I wanted to. There's a couple of things before we get there.
mhm.
We see a little bit of like the cops in the briefing room, right? And they all wear masks. And it's kind of explained initially by the nun back in the classroom that she was one of the original sheriff or original police officers that was targeted during like the white massacre or something like that, where a lot of police officers were attacked in their houses. And I think this is probably related to why all the police wear masks now, and why she actually has a false identity, like sorry, a false career, because anyone who's a cop can't say that they're a cop. It's part of the law that they have to fabricate exactly what they do for a living, so nobody um, knows their true identity, and so they can't be targeted in the future. And this is why that they're all wearing masks. But again, we're probably going to find out a little bit more about that, or it's going to. I think I don't really need to know too much about it, like other than this is an event that happened. Maybe they're going to have one big episode dedicated to it, and it's going to be this cool shootout and stuff like that. But I think ultimately that's the reason as to why the cops wear these masks. And later on in the episode, we see that okay, they're going to be using the information that they gleaned from the guy that they captured. They go to a farm, and there's this big action scene. What did you think about that particular scene?
I don't know. It so far it didn't really interest me that much.
Mm-hmm.
Like like I like the action
I
scene.
found out cows are very bulletproof. That's what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
found.
that's what it's like very gory and very like I guess gutsy in such a way where it's like yeah, that's a lot of blood, but like I don't know, it's just a standard affair. Like there's not really to me it didn't really stand out that much of in the sense of like interesting action. I am
You see,
interested. I am interested if they. I want to see more hand to hand combat and what they do with it. I feel like having to do the film, Zack Snyder and Cal, he did action in the comic book. I feel like I wish they kind of used that or translated it as more because like like for example in the Watchmen movie and as well as the graphic novel, the fight with the comedian at the start of the film to me is a really great fight scene and like when they go to the prison, really great fight scene, and when they Osmandius at his like layout, really great fight scene. It has like some good weight to it with the punches as well, and I feel like that's maybe a thing that this show is lacking. That it just doesn't have the right, I don't know, edge. Like I feel like Zack
Okay.
Snyder's always been good with that.
I kind of did like the goriness of the particular like exchange that they were having,
Oh
and I
yeah,
did
yeah,
like
absolutely.
the
Because even in the graphic novel and every interpretation of Watchmen has been like pretty damn gory.
well, and I think that's the thing that I'm kind of getting from this show, that it is kind of being this hyper violent show. There is a, like the nun, like she's like basically deputized so she can just like walk into someone's house, but like kick it open and just drag him out, right? And there's like no resistance from anyone. Like you can just imagine if this was like a complete stranger doing this. Right? Like how would you like that's the kind of the crazy thing. It's like how would you know whether somebody is really a cop or not if they're going to be covering their face and like that? But I guess we'll have to see like as the show goes on. The other thing is one of the characters, he's like in all red, and he turned out to be Russian. So maybe it means that American Russians good now, like after the events of Watchmen as well, because Russia had a lot of problems with him. We see like the sheriff like flying like the same ship that Night Owl 2 was flying, right? I don't know if it's the same ship or it's like some kind of, I don't know, mass produced prototype or something like that. But
Or like, cause like the way I read it is because some people would say it's the original ship and they just randomly put it there as an Easter egg. What I thought it was at the police or whatever it may be at some point just sees the technology and kind of like replicated the
yeah, you
technology
see
and
that.
then it's used as a normal vehicle or like certain police vehicle
Mhm.
or something like that.
You see that? Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think also. Although the funny thing is, like, it almost kind of lost to the plane, the traditional plane, and it was kind of like everybody was like shocked that these guys had a plane. So it's almost like in this future, nobody flies planes anymore, which is really weird because the thing is they're all driving cars, um, and the thing is, Dr. Manhattan actually created like electric cars or like like energy like so that people like in the like they were highly advanced in that Watchmen future, like in the 80s. Like he basically solves like a lot of the problems of like pollution and stuff by having everybody drive electric cars. I'm not too sure if the reason why that is like they don't use them anymore, but I think it's also kind of related to maybe the events that are happening right now, because for example you see like a bunch of them taking like these these watch batteries from watches that they had, right? And they just after in a party scene, they have like an exchange. They're like, oh, these are like synthetic lithium that you can't get your hands on anymore, and that might be related to maybe Dr. Manhattan, and maybe like the reason why people don't use phones and stuff. Like they all use pages. That was something that I kind of saw as well. It's like, why is everybody using pages in 2019? It's very strange. Like maybe that there's this kind of scare from using advanced technology because everybody thinks that Dr. Manhattan is giving him like cancer and stuff. So all his tech is still giving him cancer. Because
Yeah.
that's again a point of contention in the comic. It's a point of contention in the movie. So maybe all these lithium, they're trying to get this lithium tech or all this like lithium like batteries to make something. And
Yeah,
maybe
well,
that's
it is interesting where it points out, and it's kind of like it could be maybe a source of like a control almost, where it's like you know to kind of like the government has this type of technology or certain things, but other people don't. Just because they say so, and it's like, as as we mentioned before about the kind of theory of like the government keeping everything a secret. It's like, and as you were talking before about the scene where they're just like showing Dr. Manhattan footage. It's almost like maybe it's like a doctored footage where it's like they don't actually know what he's doing, but it's like fake. It's just to keep the lie up.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I don't want to assume from this one episode that everything is what it's expected to be. We also see later on, like as you were mentioning, the sheriff kind of, he gets called out and he's gonna go and see like the officer who has recovered in the hospital, and he basically gets jumped. It was really weird because he kind of clearly sees like his car got hit by spikes, and he's kind of cool about it. Like he doesn't like panic, he doesn't get a gun out, he doesn't do anything, and he eventually just gets like taken. I don't know. I was very like weirded out by that scene. It's like, why would he not be freaking out? Like, especially given like these, you know what I mean? Like, it's just in full panic mode that these spikes are on the road. Like, clearly somebody did this on purpose. He was also, I think he was also doing cocaine earlier. So like, yeah, he's clearly quite out of it. So maybe that's the explanation. But I don't know. I still think like it's pretty shoddy writing to say the least. But the other thing I want to make, sorry, that I just kind of passed on in my notes was they did have the scene with who is presumably Adrian V. He's like an old man. He's being cared for by these by this a waiter and I guess an assistant. I don't know.
Like maid, pretty much.
Maid. Sorry, that I was trying to look for the word. And they're kind of like almost like robotic in their function. So I think like a lot of people are kind of thinking, oh, maybe these people are robots, or maybe these people are kind of genetically engineered like clones created by, and that's the reason why they're kind of like chill with everything he's doing, and like they make him a watch and he's kind of like smiles at it, and things like that. But he says to them, I have a plan and it's going to be in 5 acts, and you guys are going to and once I'm done, you're going to be the main stars. So maybe he might be getting them to commit some kind of new atrocity that we're going to see later in the series. That's my potential prediction for it.
Because as I was mentioning before, that seems to be the through line of this whole thing. It's like you have the police detective side of things, where it's defeating the Rorschach gang, and I feel like that's a sense of conflict. So then Adrian V is kind of like almost kind of like a, it's kind of like the middleman almost, where it's kind of like the Cold War.
Well, maybe I think maybe his story is kind of like what the Black Freighter was in the comic. It was like this kind of almost like a side story that's explaining something. Although it's not going to be a side story. We also don't know whether this is happening chronologically.
Didn't even take that into consideration, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because that's the thing. We don't actually know whether the event that we're seeing actually happened on the same day as the other stuff that we're seeing with the nun and the sheriff and stuff. Like,
come on, HBO can't be doing 2 like semi-travel like time travel shows at the same time.
What's the other one that they're doing?
What? Westworld. Like
no one cares. Nobody cares about.
I'm just like, come on, man. Like, one show had the one like had the trick. You can't do it again. Like, you could.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, like, it could all be just to explain the rain event or something. But anyways, who knows? Again, I don't know yet. Because at the moment, because the thing is, it would explain why everybody thinks he's dead. Like in the newspaper that we saw earlier, that it says Agent V dead, but he's clearly alive. So maybe that's the reason why the things that we're seeing is in the past and not something that's present. But it might not be. Who knows? Maybe he faked his death and now he's doing some other crazy shit. I don't know. But yeah, we later on see that the nun kind of finds out about what happened to the sheriff, and then we see this old man that we saw earlier, who's like, hey, I think earlier he says like, oh, do I look like somebody who can hold 200, who can lift 200 pounds to her, right? He says that earlier at the bakery. and she's just kind of like, what are you talking about? But then later on, you see him near this guy. Like maybe that's what he was actually responding to, if that makes sense. Like he's almost like
Foreshadowing.
well, not foreshadowing, but maybe he has some kind of ability that lets him, like almost kind of like what happens to Doctor Manhattan in the comics. Like he's almost like he's not in like a linear timeline. He's almost kind of reacting to things in the future, but he's talking in the present. So like maybe when he was talking to her at the bakery, it's like he was really talking to her at this scene at the tree. And that's when she like he asked like, oh, like she asked like, oh, did you do this? And he's like I can lift 200 pounds, which is how much the cop would maybe weigh. Like I don't know, that's the kind of thing, like maybe he has some kind of significance, and it kind of gets revealed he's like the boy at the beginning. And you kind of also see like the badge have like the classic kind of Watchmen comedian like blood splatter on the star, which is on the badge, which is to harken back to that, because the comedian is kind of the catalyst that leads to the greater event. So maybe it's like the death of the sheriff leads to the wider event that happens in this particular season.
And that's the thing. It's like we have to wait until like episode 2 until like why he killed the sheriff, anyways. And that's what I was kind of
well, we don't. Well, that's the thing. I don't think he killed him. I think maybe
or he just reported it.
Yeah, or something, or he was there at the same time because he's got this weird clairvoyant ability. But yeah, I think the one thing I have a bit of a problem about the show is they do a lot of references to the Watchmen comic. But the thing is, Watchmen as a comic had its own kind of internal symbolism, whereas this is kind of using the symbolism of Watchmen rather than trying to come and it's kind of trying to do its best to kind of reference Watchmen, like, ooh, 1985, that happened in Watchmen. Oh, the blood. Like, I knew
like
immediately
we're at the at the classroom kitchen, and then the eggs make a smiley face. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, the eggs make a smiley face, and like one of the eggs have like a bit of blood in it, much like the blood splatters. Like, okay, yeah, I get it. There's like a lot of these kind of like Watchmen references, but to anybody who's obviously doesn't know anything Watchmen related, like they're not gonna understand it. But like, I get it. It's like Easter egg stuff. But again, it's one of those things that I hope it's not just a show that is Watchmen in name only. Like,
yeah, that's my biggest criticism. It's like so far, I do not see it. I don't see the whole point or like theming of it. Now it could be true. Like it could. Moving forward, it could be very interesting, but so far, as I mentioned before, it seems to be Watchmen in name, or like it's dropping these Watchmen references, and it could have that at least morally gray, because especially it's pretty much set up the whole police brutality thing, and even just white supremacy, and it's like you kind of want that almost like maybe it's just a gray, like a sense of gray of understanding between like these two factions and groups. And I think, but that's the thing. I don't know if it's gonna do that, or like I hope it does something like that.
I mean, that's the thing that I was kind of like I looked at it like they were. I think there's a scene where like all the cops are asking for like open carry and being able to use their weapons, right? And it was almost kind of like cheered when the chief kind of allowed it, but obviously having police being open with guns and being able to shoot people willy-nilly, like that's obviously something that people shouldn't be celebrating either. But I think that's the point. Like it's supposed to show that like the world is becoming more controlled and authoritarian, that they have to use these tactics, or they think that they have to use these tactics to fight what they perceive is a greater evil. Now the thing is, I hope and that it isn't as simplistic as, oh, these are just Rorschach supremacists. I think ultimately it's going to be something that, oh, maybe there's like someone who, maybe it's Adrian, maybe it's someone else, is like kind of controlling these guys and telling them what to do, to have all these kind of maybe domestic terrorist attacks like around, America. Because the thing is, this was something that this town dealt with apparently 3 years ago, what's to say that other places haven't dealt with their own form of, um, you know, kind of domestic terrorism because they've been inspired by Rorschach,
Mm.
to question the government, to question the current world narrative. Because again, if you haven't watched or if you haven't read the movie, sorry,
Haven't
if
read
you
the
haven't read
movie.
the book, if you haven't read the graphic novel, or if you haven't watched the book, you might not know that the whole event, the Squid event, the global alien invasion was actually a fake event, and it didn't well, the giant squid part happened, but the whole
Alien race that's trying
alien
to kill.
invasion
Yeah.
part didn't. Yeah, it's all like a fictitious psychic attack, um, and it was orchestrated by Adrian Veidt. Now, I'm hoping that it is kind of related to that, and we're only kind of seeing like a slice of this. We're seeing it in Tuscany, where this particular place is set in. But we'll have to see going forward whether it is something that is more complex or whether it is just like quote unquote air quote complex, like a Lindelof complex, which is very shallow and surface
It's
level.
simple, but it wanders around for a long time. That it makes you feel like it is more.
Then
You know,
actually,
yeah,
yeah.
because essentially, like the leftovers. Essentially, the whole point of it, the 3 season run is almost like the main character and the main reason why he has this ability for some reason to help people and kind of and people are drawn naturally to him. Essentially, I'm gonna kind of spoil like the whole like mystery part of the leftovers
That's
almost.
fine.
Um,
That's fine.
he's basically the new Jesus. Um, for the
Uh-huh.
rapture. That was basic. The basic premise of it. But it took a
Uh-huh.
very long time to kind of get to that point, and it was a lot of mystery of like why is all this stuff happening to him, and why is everything like that. So that was
So it's,
basically the hidden mystery of that show.
so is it like one? Did a lot of people predict that that was the case, or no? It was a big surprise to people watching
I don't know because I watched it a little bit after it ended
after.
because
Okay,
I do
yeah,
remember
sure.
it just lasted 3 seasons. I think the reception of the first season it was just very very like depressing, and then the second and third season kind of warmed it up a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, at that point I think it lost like a lot of ratings and things like that. But
Yeah.
I think it was just an interesting concept of just like yeah people just disappeared and finding out why. But then added this whole extra group of, for example, like there was like a cult, this church cult who believes that like if they worship enough, they'll be like ascended as well, like they'll go wherever the missing people are going as well, and they took a vow of silence, and these people getting murdered and things like that. So there's all this like random stuff in there as well, with
Hmm.
class warfare, and I feel like you can kind of maybe see the themes kind of mixing in between the leftovers and Watchmen as well. But I do hope in a sense that it is a little bit more smarter than it does lead on. Um, it does remind me of people just like, yeah, man, Inception was really complex. I'm like, it's not really. It's just dreams within a dreams. Like, it's not like that complex where people were just like, I don't
Wait, did
understand it.
did Lindelof write
No, no, no,
Inception?
no. That's just me just pulling something. I just remember people
Uh,
just being like, I didn't understand this.
I, th-
This movie.
I think the thing is like the way that Inception is filmed is like you're not sure whether sometimes like something is a dream or it isn't, but obviously as you watch the film it becomes clear. But even the very ending of the film wasn't supposed to be, apparently it wasn't supposed to be like, oh, is DiCaprio in a dream or not. He actually technically isn't in a dream, and that's confirmed by the director, by Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, like I think the thing is that if you're apprehensive about watching this show, like maybe don't go into it thinking that it's going to be a certain way, but at the same time remember that Lindelof and the kind of writing in Watchmen is supposed to be like, hey, don't think everything is what it seems. And I'm kind of giving it a little bit of a I don't know what you call it. I'd probably
Cautiously
say
optimistic, but hoping.
not well, not optimistic. I mean, I think prior to the show coming out, I was quite pessimistic. But I think the thing is, I'm just going to give it the benefit of the doubt that there's it's has a little bit more to chew on than something as simple as obvious bad guys, obvious racists are bad guys, and cops are good guys. Or vigilantes. Because I guess she's not technically a police officer; she's a vigilante. So vigilante's good, racist bad. I'm hoping it's not as something as simple as that, and that there's something more to chew on than that. But we'll have to see.
It could be one of those things where it's like, yeah, it could be like, okay, you did an interesting story, but we'll check in and probably like, like later on and things like that, and see what they actually do, and if they actually do it. That's the real mystery behind everything. Are they really going to do what we say?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not sure. Like, perhaps they'll give, they'll have something in particular with the show that really highlights it. But I think we'll just kind of, review. Like, if there's a particular good episode, we'll kind of mention it and see what our thoughts are. But this isn't going to be like a Game of Thrones episode review. Like we have been doing. Even though, poor Game of Thrones, even towards the end, it did really bad.
Yeah. It once again, let's just forget about that ever existing and just move on with our lives.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, Don.
Absolutely. But yeah, that will be us for this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and our YouTube channel, Marketing Movies, where we do stream when we can. So until next time, Henry Cavill could be, in the Watchmen universe as as a vigilante, but who knows? Because it's all a mystery. So until next time, see ya.
Catch up.